My thoughts on Bagwell are simple. He needs to just retire and never lace him up again. Because of him, we would never know what kind of WCW we would got. But Vince to want to give them his flagship show, WCW, on Monday Night Raw, for a full flesh. The idea was to give me just a minute. Alright. The idea was to give WCW Mondays. I don't know if they were going to rename it. Probably not, being that it was the flagship at the time. Still is for a lot of people. And then WWE was going to run those shows on what was then Thursday Night SmackDown, which is now Tuesday nights, but next year coming back to Friday nights. Bagwell, because of his backstage attitude and the match that they had, it never got off the ground. Now, they should have waited till they were like in Georgia, Atlanta, to do a WCW match. You probably got a very different crowd reaction, being that WCW was homegrown from Atlanta, Georgia. Even tried to do it in maybe Orlando, Florida. But the thing is, Bagwell cost a lot of people a lot of stuff. What would have probably happened is WCW, WWE, you've probably seen some cross promotions, probably even seen yearly drafts like we kind of have with the shakeup now. But Bagwell ruined that all. I could see a lot of the old WCW guys still around, and we would probably have new AJ Styles, who's probably been part of the Vince McMahon enterprise a lot sooner, because he was part of WCW in 2001. But because of one guy, we don't know what would have happened. Would it have been a disaster waiting to happen? I don't know. Would it have been a very good success? Again, we don't know. But he won't be in the Hall of Fame, at least while the McMahon family is running the WWE. Now, if this rumor that Fox is interested in buying, and there's been talk, from what I understand, if that rumor is really true and Vince does sell and is no longer part of the McMahon empire, anything could happen, even now. Because with the McMahon sell would also come ECW, WCW, AWA probably. I think they are now part of that, being that the AWA was purchased by, originally was purchased by Ted Turner. So I think that came with the sell. The NWA, from when Turner took over in the late 80s till it was changed, would be part of this. So there's a lot of names that could be brought back, but I don't see that happening at this point. Honestly, I don't think we need it to happen at this point. Even 10 years ago, it would have been good. But we are now approaching 20 years since the sale of WCW. Not the demise, but the sale. Bischoff was literally this close from having it. He had the agreement in place, but the network decided they wasn't going to let him launch a program. His plan was to go off the air for about 3 months, promote a revival pay-per-view type thing. Basically, it was going to be similar to a Night of Champions, where they do matches to determine all the titles. Whether or not they got them all in at once, I don't know. But I do know that that was the normal plan that Bischoff had in place. But when the network decided to yank it, it became a non-issue. Now, if WCW would have only been up for sale even 3 years ago, I honestly think Bischoff would have went ahead and bought it, because now you have networks that wrestling promotion create. We got the WWE network. We got GWN network. ROH now has their own network. New Japan has their own network. You can survive nowadays without a TV deal. You got YouTube that has programming on it. You got Netflix that does programming. Hulu. I mean, you don't need, nowadays, you do not need a cable network to survive. So, it was just a bad timing for Ted Turner to want to get out. And it wasn't even Ted Turner, it was AOL, the merge. Because if they would even waited 10 years, they wouldn't have needed to broadcast on the network, and they could still be getting whatever the paycheck was that was coming in. I mean, at the point, they were losing quite a bit of money. But at one time, they were making over $80 billion a year. So it would only took one turnaround. And with Hogan, Hall, and Nash owning portions of the NWO, they could have relaunched that many times. I'm fixing to probably do another video on where I think they could go with the Shield. What I think they can do with the Undisputed Era. And what they should do with Sanity. We have, and even the New Day probably could be portioned. We have 1, 2, 4 groups of 3 now. Potentially, a 5th group of 3 could be popped up. I think I will cut this video here. I shall be back in a few. Till then, this is Wrestling for Fans, signing off. Cheers.